For most Americans, retirement doesn't arrive all at once. It unfolds gradually over years, sometimes decades, shaped by decisions made long before the final paycheck ever arrives. And to understand why the IRS changes leading into 2026 matter so much, it helps to look at how retirement income actually works in real life, not in theory, not in spreadsheets, but in everyday American households. For millions of people across the United States, retirement income is no longer built on a single source. It's a combination. A 401k or IRA accumulated over years of work, maybe a pension if they're fortunate enough to have one, and Social Security acting as the foundation, the one source many Americans rely on to cover essential expenses. That balance is delicate. When the IRS adjusts tax brackets, income thresholds, or retirement account rules, it doesn't just affect high earners or wealthy households. According to IRS publications and Treasury Department data, these adjustments increasingly touch middle-income Americans, especially those approaching retirement or already taking distributions. Here's where the issue becomes personal. Many Americans assume that once they stop working, their tax burden will naturally decrease. After all, income goes down, so taxes should too. But IRS guidance shows that this isn't always the case anymore. Required minimum distributions, combined income calculations, and the way Social Security benefits are taxed can quietly push retirees into higher taxable income ranges than they ever expected. The Social Security Administration explains that when combined income crosses certain thresholds, a portion of Social Security benefits becomes taxable, not because benefits were reduced, not because rules were broken, but because of how income is calculated. That means Americans can find themselves paying taxes on income they believed was guaranteed, income they had already counted on, simply because the tax treatment changed. And those thresholds don't always adjust at the same pace as real-world costs. Inflation raises everyday expenses. Healthcare premiums increase, housing, utilities, and insurance costs climb steadily. But tax exposure doesn't disappear. In many cases, it grows. This is why official IRS reports show a steady rise in the number of retirees owing more in federal taxes than retirees did a decade ago, even when their lifestyles haven't improved dramatically. It's not reckless spending, it's structural change. Now imagine a typical middle-class American household entering retirement in their early 60s. They're not wealthy. They're not struggling. They did what they were told to do. They worked consistently. They saved regularly. They contributed to retirement accounts. They delayed Social Security as long as they reasonably could. On paper, everything looks sensible. Then distributions begin. At first, they're modest, just enough to supplement Social Security and cover monthly expenses. A few $1,000s one year, a little more the next. Social Security benefits start flowing. They're steady. They feel reliable. They feel like income that's already been earned. But the IRS doesn't look at each source separately. It looks at the total picture. Adjusted gross income, taxable distributions, and combined income, the calculation that determines how much of Social Security becomes taxable. At first, the impact feels small. A slightly smaller refund, a little more owed than expected. Nothing alarming. But over time, thresholds are crossed, not because income exploded, but because inflation pushed nominal values higher, and because rules shifted quietly in the background. Eventually, required minimum distributions enter the picture. They're not optional. They're not flexible. They arrive on a schedule set by the IRS, regardless of personal circumstances. And this is where many Americans feel caught off guard. Not because they made mistakes, not because they mismanaged money, but because the structure changed around them. Households that once assumed their tax burden would decline in retirement suddenly find themselves paying more in federal taxes than they did during some working years. Not dramatically more, but enough to matter. Enough to affect monthly planning. Enough to create uncertainty. And uncertainty is one of the most difficult challenges middle-class Americans face in retirement. Because retirement planning isn't about chasing higher returns. It's about stability. predictability, knowing what's coming before it arrives. This is why the IRS adjustments heading toward 2026 matter. They don't arrive as a headline-grabbing event. They don't feel urgent at first. They appear gradually, through updated brackets, revised thresholds, and technical changes most people only notice when they file a return. Slow change rarely feels dangerous, until suddenly it is. Many Americans only recognize the impact when they file taxes, take a larger-than-expected distribution, or realize their monthly income doesn't stretch as far as it used to. By then, options can feel limited. That's why awareness matters. Not to predict the future, not to panic, but to understand how these systems, IRS rules, retirement accounts, and Social Security, interact in practice. Because once you understand the structure, you begin to see why informed Americans are paying attention now. They're not making drastic moves. They're not chasing shortcuts. They're asking better questions. They're reviewing how income sources overlap. They're paying attention to timing. They're understanding how small changes today can affect taxes years down the line. And most importantly, they're avoiding surprises. Because the goal isn't to eliminate taxes. The goal is to manage expectations, to know what's coming, to plan calmly, to adjust gradually rather than react suddenly. As 2026 approaches, these conversations become more important, not because something dramatic will happen overnight, but because small, quiet shifts add up over time. And for the American middle class, preparation isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. Because in a system shaped by rules, thresholds, and timelines, the most valuable financial tool isn't prediction, it's understanding.